Here we go with the Business Not As Usual podcast coming at you, Vince and Mike.
Coming at you.
Mikey, what's going on, buddy?
Just sitting here thinking, Vince, about some stuffs.
Oh.
And the thing that's been on my mind, Vince, is there a connection between business process and channel management / channel delivery?
Yes. Episode over.
Yes. And done. Shortest episode ever. What are your thoughts, everybody?
Tell us what you think.
Tell us what you think.
Without hearing what we have to say, what do you think? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, it's funny when we talk about different channels, and I'll preface this with, years ago, I was working on a project where I was leading the process documentation and then ultimately improvement stream of work. And we were going through this process of like documenting the process for fax, documenting the process for mail, documenting the process for digital, and every single one of this organization's processes had, I think they were supporting like 7 or 8 different channels. And the funny thing was, and this was never sort of absorbed by the business stakeholders who were the decision makers in this one. It's like, it should be the same process. It should be like your channel, your processes should be channel agnostic. Because what we ended up doing was building these like on-ramps and off-ramps to every single other. It was an absolute nightmare.
So you had 7 different processes, one for each.
Correct.
A customer problem, I don't know, we'll leave it at that, or transaction.
Yeah.
Had a different process if they were to call than if they were to mail something in, than if they were to go on the digital. Wow.
Yes.
How did you even do change management? Like how does like a frontline, like a customer facing employee even like manage that or do work around that?
You can't. Like unfortunately, change management was somewhat lacking, which meant that
fortunately
the frontline staff just ended up doing whatever they needed. Whatever they needed to. And it was in this situation, I'm all for standardization and having the one best way. In this case, it actually made a ton of sense because they were just trying to keep up with what was going on. And the reality is you can't expect that your customers aren't going to jump channels. That they started on the phone, but now they move to digital, and then they're going to mail you something, and maybe they have to come into the office to do whatever transaction. Mm-hmm. Like you need your process needs to be agnostic of channels, but needs to acknowledge and support the different channels. Now, Mikey, I'm on a roll, and as we've talked about in the pregame here, I'm fired up today.
Go. Fire.
Here is the rub, as it were. What was going on in the situation that I described is they were trying to give everything to everybody. They were trying to be available. We wanted to be everywhere. You want to send in a carrier pigeon? Yeah, we can work with that.
Right.
But you have to have then a process that supports the carrier pigeon channel. You have to have a way of managing work. And so the best thing that this organization should have done is actually limited channels.
Or channels.
So that you don't make things all things possible, but you only have the 1 or 2 or 3 ways of doing business, and then handle the rest as exceptions. But I digress.
Yeah. So I think there's this misconception that for you to be customer centric, you have to offer them every possible way of doing business with you. And it's been proven that just because you offer more channels, it doesn't mean the journey's better. It's actually worse.
It's worse.
And it doesn't mean your customer satisfaction is better. It's actually worse because you're terrible in every channel. And for the most part, most companies, as Vince described, try and have a different process for every channel. Instead of saying, what's the best channel for this customer job? Now, the best channel is digital. So they need to do something like give you an intake for a problem. So the best way to do that is, and the quickest, the most efficient for you and for your customer, is for them to do something online. So they send it to you and then the process starts, as opposed to them send it in by mail, because they don't give you the right information and then you have to call. And so what you're looking to do is funnel people to the right channel, which then starts your process. Or the other way around. But you have to have your processes in place, and they have to be tight and not fat and as efficient as possible for you then to try and manage people in the different channels.
And think about, yes, you're 100% right. You've got to sort of funnel them. And this is where data can be really, really important. And this was lacking and very powerful. Because, we were, in many cases, we were building processes for like 5% things that happened, once a year. And it's it still needs to be supported. And so, that becomes problematic. So figure out which channel are your customers using. And then, to your point, Mike, figure out the best channel so that you can nudge them in that direction. So and again, use data, right? So if you've got a particular transaction that you do, 10,000 times a day, and it's largely an exchange of information, it's not really time sensitive, it's just whatever, then I think the digital channel is your ideal place, because we can exchange information through a portal or whatever. And I think we talked portal last episode. But it's very simple. There's not a lot of explanation. It's not time sensitive. Versus something that is a customer problem and needs to be addressed immediately. I'm not sending a letter, and I'm not waiting on a letter. Like, this is where, if you want something resolved quickly, even waiting on a digital solution may not be the right approach. So you pick up the phone and you just deal with it, right? So it's figuring out what is the best channel to support process XYZ, and then making that the most attractive channel, so that you can funnel people to that channel, and then manage workflow from there.
And so when you're trying to, so if you're moving from a traditional business to, let's say, a more customer-centric, digitally enabled, that's somewhat different than if you're just creating new processes, because you have to take into consideration all the processes you have, and then say, okay, how do we either re-engineer it, or do we reimagine it, or do we just tweak it? And as you always say, eliminate before you automate. I think that's what you say.
It's what I say.
Good. And so do you do that, or do you go, okay, let's blow this away and then take into consideration how we want people to do it? Because that's different than if you were just starting a brand new line of business and you had like a greenfield. So I think for the most part, most of us don't have the luxury of that. We work for businesses, or you go into a client that already has a process, and now they're trying to modernize, let's say. And so how would you tackle that when you have all these new channels popping up and the company wants to use it? So do you blow away the process, or do you re-engineer it?
Right. Well, and this is where you are at an advantage if you are building something new, because you can imagine what the process should be, and then what channels you're even going to support. It's difficult when we're talking about established businesses that are they've got that bureaucracy, they've got the history, they've got a way of doing work. It then becomes difficult to reimagine, because that's not how they're built, and this is where culture becomes really important. So when we're talking about process, and you've alluded to it, there's process improvement, which I would describe as like continuously improving, tweaking, innovating on what you have. There's process re-engineering, which is taking what you currently do, stripping it down, and then building it back up, which is I don't know, it's fun, but it's probably the hardest to do, because you are, the thing is, like, when you are re-engineering, that existing process still exists, and so you're almost trying to build processes that run concurrently, and then you can decommission one, and then the third one is engineering, which is coming up with something brand new, and that's oftentimes the easiest, although it can be challenging if you miss some stuff. So when you are re-engineering, you are tearing down, and you have to leave the old there. So it can be difficult to do when you are, trying to change a process, re-engineer the process to support new channels. Now, this is where there is some value in taking sort of a diversified approach, as it were, where if a new channel becomes available, and I'll just, we're going to now support our users through Twitter, and I'm just picking Twitter. Well, now I can come up with a process specific to Twitter to support our customers and leave the existing legacy process in place. Now, once the new process is in play, I can either change the other ones over slowly, the other channels over slowly, to the Twitter way, or I can do the other way, where, okay, we tried this new thing to support this new channel, it doesn't work, we're going to make a change and just improve in some other space. So, I mean, the way to do it is to have them run concurrently, and that's often inelegant because it can lead to a lot of variation in the work that you're doing, because I'm going to get a different experience when I'm using Twitter versus a website or a phone or whatever. But and better, and different doesn't always mean worse. It could be better, but it's different. And that, back to my original point of the process is the process. It actually shouldn't matter what channel I'm using. The process is what it is. So, just from a staff perspective, it becomes quite cumbersome to keep all of the different processes in my head aligned, when I need to know, did this come in through the fax because it's going to go this way, or did it come in through Twitter because then it's got to go that way? And it's ridiculous to manage.
So I guess this is where the question, and we've talked about this. So do you plan the journey through the channels first, or do you create the process and then create the journey through those what you've deemed as the best channel, or the channel of choice, or the best channel for the job?
I mean, I've done both.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I actually don't have a preference as to which one comes first. But just sort of in my mind, that journey is a concept. much like we talked about in service design. Like the journey is a concept that makes sense on paper, and until you can map a process to support it, you're not going to know whether it's, good or bad.
Right.
So you could do the process first and then say, okay, now this is the journey. Do they map? Or I could do the journey first and then say, here's the process. Does it map? So it actually doesn't matter. What's important is that they do align.
Yes.
Right. We had a comment in so at the event that we recently spoke at. We got our questions that we need to still respond to, and one of them was, and this like popped out at me, and I messaged you my answer because I loved writing it. What if your customers aren't aware of your process? So what if they're not aware of what your process is? And my response was, and hey, if anyone asks, I will own this one. It's not their job to.
Absolutely.
It is not their job to align to your process. You are the one giving them a product or a service. It's up to you to fit into their life, not the other way around. And so, but this is a common sort of misconception.
Your it's not your customer's job to know your org chart or your silos, or
right. Same.
It's not their job to do that. So it should be a seamless journey, but you should always start with that.
Right.
I don't care what my bank's process is.
Right. Yeah. And so in that sense, your culture will dictate which comes first, process or journey.
Right.
I think, to me, it's easier if you are a customer-centric organization. You're probably going to default to the journey first.
Right.
Because you will try to change the process to match the journey. If you aren't customer-centric, and that's okay if you're not, then you can't dictate to the customer what their journey should be, but you can use tactics like behavioral economics and nudging to drive a particular behavior. So you're not telling them what to do, but you're providing an incentive to your preferred behavior. Right? So it's really about how you want to approach it. But to me, it's easier to change process than to drive human behavior. But maybe that's a bias in that I don't want to admit that humans are so easily manipulated.
Okay. Well, speaking about manipulation, I think the one that the big buzzword, and I don't know how many companies actually have met this, but and you'll hear it at every conference, the Omni Channel experience. And then how, from a process perspective, like, how does your company actually serve that Omni Channel experience? Because not many do. And so just a brief highlight of, like, what does that mean? What are we talking about Omni Channel? It's that your channels and your processes are so finely integrated that Vince could start his journey, let's say online, get into a snag, call your service area, and they know exactly what he's already done online, help him either finish that transaction or give him enough information for him to then maybe they can advance the transaction a bit. And then Vince jumps back offline and finishes let's say on his phone.
Right.
And so in that scenario, he's used 3 channels. They all were integrated. So you knew exactly what Vince was doing. He didn't have any service disruption. And so, that's the great panacea. That's the gold standard, platinum standard, I guess. How do you, which goes to your original point, Vince, it's all the same process. You just have different inputs into it.
Yes. And I'm going to add, that is where the exchange of data is critical.
It's huge.
So
big time.
I'm not storing data from step 1 in this database and from step 2 in this other place and step 3, because it's all data about that particular transaction. So having data that is available readily at all stops along the journey makes that omni-channel experience, brings you much closer to that omni-channel experience, because now it doesn't matter that I'm jumping from one channel to another. The data is still the data. So that when I do have to call into your support area and say, hey, I was on the website, I hit this snag, I had to go out, but now I'm calling you while I'm waiting for my groceries because I'm back in lockdown and I need to pick them up. Because I've got some time, right? So now I'm calling you, and as soon as you help me advance to that next day in the scenario that you created, now I can go on my phone and finish it myself.
Right.
Data makes that possible, and without the data available in a data lake or some repository across the process, and not only across the process but across processes.
Yes, and across channels.
Across all of that stuff. That is not the omni-channel experience is not possible, I would argue, because it's data that actually makes that possible.
Yes. And so, that I'm pretty sure anybody who's working on a transformational program or a modernization, that's what they're looking for. And that's where you can't have these silos. You can't have, if it comes in by mail, it's going to go here, and and it's not digitized, and if it comes in from a phone call, it's going to be in another database, and that may or may not be digitized. And then if the customer does it on their own, well, that's a completely separate database. If you have that, you'll never have that, and it's not just about the channels.
Correct.
The channel is the last thing you have to worry about. You need this infrastructure behind it to be able to deliver that, including the process, but also the data in the right spot, with your ability to tap into it.
Well, and it also improves the customer experience, because now I'm not asking them their name 8,000 times. I'm not asking them for the same pieces of information or to fill in the same forms if you're still using forms, because the form is just a delivery mechanism for data. So if I can now share that data, and I have, and this is another challenge that I've observed in a lot of organizations, they call different things, different data elements, different things.
Or the same data elements.
The same data. So it's
all the time.
Birth
drives
date,
me crazy.
Or date of birth, or DOB. So all the same thing, but they're listed differently in the database.
Well,
and so
not only this is my pet peeve. It's not only in the database; it's on their different, the difference between the way they send a letter to when you go online to maybe even the app. It's like they don't use the same word. So we're looking for your client number. Then you go, okay, we're looking for your client number. It's on the letter. Then you go on the letter and it says customer number. Is that the same one? And then you go on the app and it's like your unique ID. Are those all the same things? Are they different things? No, they're all the same things.
Right.
Okay, great. But why are you making me think so much? I don't want to think.
Right.
Make it easy. What? So not only are they labeled incorrectly in the back system, they're labeled incorrectly for the customer. And again, that's channel management. If you're not being consistent, you got problems.
Yeah. Oh, you got problems.
You got problems.
Yeah. So a lot of this then speaks to I would say our main thesis, which is there's a ton of work to do before you start the transformational work. Here's just another example.
Huge.
Right? And this started from a question. But like this is a tremendous amount of work. Even just aligning on data labels is a tremendous amount of work. Depending on the size of and structure of your organization, that is a huge bit of work. But if you can get that done, it makes the management of data and therefore the leveraging of data that much easier. So yes, it is hard. And nobody wants to do that because it doesn't feel,
because it's hard.
It's hard, but it's incredibly important because it makes everything else come easier. You're doing the hard, you're doing the heavy lifting up front so that you can provide a more seamless experience on the back end.
And if you do, so everyone starts with, we need a fill in the blank.
We need an app.
We need an app. We need a virtual assistant. We need AI. We need
machine learning, robotic process. We need a chatbot.
We need a chatbot. So everybody starts with, we need a chatbot. If you start the other way and have all these things in place, those things come quick. You have the data that's proper, that you then can data mine. If you got the efficient processes, then you can get to the cool stuff of quick iterations, and I can get a product out in 2 weeks. Without all those things, you start with the product, you got to reverse engineer it all. And then everybody's like, well, why did it take us 2 years to do that? Because you didn't have you didn't have the hard work done. So if you do the hard work, then when you get to you have all that done, then we can build all these channels. Those come together in weeks because the hard work is already done.
Yeah.
Vince is smiling over there.
No, I'm smiling because I have empathy for both sides of that scenario that you just described. Because the we need an app comes from your senior leaders. And they are focused on the outcome. They see other organizations that have an app and they are seeing positive results and they think we need an app.
Right.
Or we need a chat bot or we need whatever. They're trying to solve a problem. And this is where, having a little bit of courage or taking a little bit more of an analytical approach to say, okay, what is it that we're trying to achieve with this chatbot? Or AI or whatever, because there might be a different solution. The problem then, and I empathize with the people that are doing the work, but they just hear, I gotta deliver a chatbot. That they want a chatbot, I gotta deliver a chatbot. And so you end up doing things that don't actually move the proverbial needle.
Well, what's even more frustrating is, let's say you're let's pretend you actually need the chatbot.
Sure.
And let's pretend your company is the same as this other company. And your senior leaders were at a conference or they were at a breakfast and they're like, the old, we got a chatbot and we increased our customer satisfaction productivity. It's all 37%. Okay, got it. So now they come back and go, well, those guys did it. We're almost we're the same size. We're in the same industry. They went up. They made sales at 50% more ever since we got the chatbot. So go do that. But didn't ask all the other questions like, did the other people have their data? Was it managed properly? Did they have the right processes? Did they have the right culture? So they just think of the end thing. They think of the goal, hey, we scored a goal, instead of they don't think of all the other things. We came out of hockey analogy, we came out of our own end in the right way, gained speed through the neutral zone, we made a whole bunch of passes because we're really good at passing, and then we scored and it was easy. They don't think any of that. They just go, the guy was standing in front of the net all by himself. Why can't we stand in front of the net all by himself? Well, because you suck, can't get out of your own zone. You play dump and chase. That's why.
But again, that's what they see. And so they are.
They see the guy standing in there, and it's an easy goal. That's what they see, without all the other stuff.
And the other stuff is hard.
It's hard, Vince. I don't want it. I just want the easy stuff. Can I just buy it?
Can I just sign a mega $1 million contract with an NBA team? It doesn't matter that I'm, just a small white guy. Can I just have an $84 million 4-year contract? Can't I just have that, please?
Or the best when you say, yeah, we can have that chat bot. Here's all the thing we have to do. And then you get the face. Like you broke their heart.
But I think that speaks to a bigger issue and a very cultural issue, which is, how do you respond to negative news or news that you don't want to hear? And I think this is an episode. This is a whole other episode. Oh, right.
Yeah, that's a full episode on that.
And this is where I do empathize with those project teams that hear, I want an app. All right, I guess we better build an app.
Right. Because you don't want to be the naysayer. You're always the person going, you need process, you need data. It's like, I got to go to that team?
No, screw it. I want the guy who's going to build me an app. It doesn't matter that the app doesn't provide value. I got an app.
Right.
So it's again, a cultural thing where, if you are hearing this naysaying, if you're being told that not that you can't have an app, but forced to do the hard thinking of, okay,
the hard work.
What is it that we need an app for, or what do we want an app to do,
or what's the things that we do? Okay, let's assume we need the app. What's the hard work for that channel?
Right.
What's the business process? What's the data? What's the change management for our frontline staff? Those are the things, like that's the hard work.
Yes.
That if you had it in place, yes, you could have the thing in a month. You don't have it in place. That's why it takes like 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. So when someone says to you, why is it going to take 8 months? Well, if we had all the infrastructure, it would have taken us a month.
Mm-hmm. And fortunately for guys like us, this is the stuff the hard stuff is what we're good at.
That's the dirt you got to get into.
It's you if you want to soar to the clouds, you got to play in the dirt. You got to start in the dirt. Right. So, but yeah, this is the
Absolutely.
stuff that we're tremendous at. And this is why at the end of our talk I said you should listen to us. What's our advice?
Yes,
hear what we're saying. Hear what we're saying and follow it. That's it.
Yeah.
Awesome. All of that from one question. Mike, what a poignant question.
One, I wonder, Vince. Mm-hmm. And then, there's lots to think about.
Tons. Well, on that note, then, there is lots to think about. We want you out in the listening ship to think about this. Let us know your thoughts. You can hit us up at vincentmirabelli.com or michaelmartino.ca. But for Mike and myself, Vince, this has been the Business Not As Usual podcast. We will catch you in the next one.
See ya.